So he was raised believing that his grandparents were his parents, his mother was his older sister, and in his life, that had to have been very confusing to him. He didn't know who he was.
It was a dark time for America. A profound darkness had settled over the nation, casting a pall over everything and filling everyone with a sense of unease that would linger for generations to come. Some sinister guy, hiding behind a charming smile and a face as ordinary as the guy next door, had emerged from the shadows. Theodore Robert Bundy, infamously known as Ted Bundy, was born on November 24, 1946, at the Elizabeth Lund Home for Unwed Mothers in Burlington, Vermont. His mother, Eleanor Louise Cowell, was only 22 years old at the time of his birth. However, the identity of Bundy's biological father remained shrouded in mystery, a puzzle that persisted for decades. As the circumstances surrounding Bundy's conception emerged, a complex web of secrets and deception unfolded. His original birth certificate identified his father as Lloyd Marshall, a salesman and veteran of the United States Air Force. However, a subsequent copy of the certificate omitted this detail, leaving the father's identity ambiguous and fueling a lifetime of speculation. Louise Cowell's account of Bundy's conception complicated the narrative further. She claimed to have encountered a war veteran named Jack Worthington, who allegedly deserted her shortly after she became pregnant. However, census records revealed that several individuals named John Worthington and Lloyd Marshall resided near Louise during the period of Bundy's conception, casting doubt on her story. Over the years, a troubling rumor circulated among family members, suggesting that Bundy's biological father might have been Louise's own father. This unsettling speculation lingered within the family for generations, prompting a relentless search for the truth. It was not until 2020, more than 7 decades after Bundy's birth, that a startling revelation finally addressed one of the most persistent mysteries surrounding his origins. Psychiatrist Dorothy Otnow Lewis disclosed in the documentary film Crazy Not Insane that a DNA test had confirmed Bundy was not the product of incest, thereby closing a dark chapter in the troubled history of the Bundy family. Ted Bundy spent the first 3 years of his life in the Roxborough area of Philadelphia. During that time, he resided with his maternal grandparents, Samuel Knecht Cowell and Eleanor Miriam Longstreet, who raised him as their own child. This arrangement was made to avoid the social stigma associated with being born out of wedlock during that era.
Ted Bundy's mother, Louise, says she still can't figure out what went wrong. In an interview with a Seattle television station yesterday, she expressed confusion at how a fun-loving and caring son could turn into a ruthless killer.
Consequently, family members, friends, and even young Ted were led to believe that his grandparents were his parents and that his mother was his elder sister. As Bundy grew older, he eventually uncovered the truth regarding his family background. His accounts of how he learned this information varied. He had been told that his grandparents were his parents and his mother was his elder sister, but he eventually discovered the truth. Biographer Ann Rule noted that he did not become aware of his true parentage until 1969, when he found his original birth record in Vermont.
His basic personality, if there was such a thing, is shy, afraid to take chances, probably afraid to give away his inner thoughts.
Bundy's emotions concerning his family were complex and often conflicting. He harbored a lasting resentment towards his mother for not revealing the identity of his biological father and for leaving him to uncover the truth independently. Nevertheless, he also expressed fondness for his grandparents. Despite these positive reflections, Bundy and other family members later characterized Samuel as a domineering bully who mistreated his wife and dog and exhibited racist and xenophobic views. Bundy's grandmother was depicted as a submissive and fearful woman who underwent electroconvulsive therapy for depression and became increasingly reluctant to leave their home in her later years. However, recent inquiries cast doubt on the portrayals of Bundy's grandparents. Some residents of Roxborough recalled Samuel as a fine man, and expressed confusion regarding allegations of his violent behavior. Bundy's family members also disputed the claims made about his grandparents. Furthermore, it was revealed that Bundy's grandmother had suffered a stroke due to obesity and was consequently unable to leave her residence, contradicting claims that she was mentally ill. In 1950, Louise made a pivotal decision that had a profound impact on her life and that of her young son, Ted. She changed her surname from Cowell to Nelson and, at the urging of several family members, left Philadelphia with Ted to live with cousins Alan and Jane Scott in Tacoma, Washington. This decision marked the beginning of a new chapter in their lives, filled with both opportunities and challenges. In Tacoma, Louise met Johnny Culpepper Bundy, a hospital cook, at an adult singles event at the First Methodist Church. They got married later that same year, and Johnny formally adopted Ted. The family grew with the birth of 4 additional children, and Johnny tried to involve Ted in family activities, such as camping trips.
We were angry for a while yesterday, even this morning, that he never confided in us. Of course, if he had, what would we have done then? You don't usually go around telling your mom that you've been doing these kinds of things.
As Theodore Bundy entered adolescence, his fascination with violence and the macabre only deepened, old chap. He spent hours poring over detective magazines and crime novels, often becoming utterly fixated on the ghastly details of violent crimes. This fixation, I dare say, would eventually manifest in his behavior, as he began to act out his dark fantasies on unsuspecting victims. Bundy's family and neighbors, you see, offered varying accounts of his childhood behavior. Some described him as a quiet and introverted young lad, whilst others recalled him as a bit of a troublemaker with a penchant for aggressive behavior. Despite these discrepancies, it's clear that Bundy's early life was marked by a complex interplay of factors that would ultimately contribute to his development as a serial offender. As Bundy entered adolescence, his social life, I'm afraid, became increasingly isolated. He claimed to have chosen to be alone, unable to grasp interpersonal relationships or develop meaningful friendships. However, his classmates from Woodrow Wilson High School remembered him as a well-known and well-liked young chap. Bundy's athletic pursuits, you see, included downhill skiing, which he rather enjoyed using pilfered equipment and forged lift tickets. Despite his seemingly normal high school experience, Bundy's behavior, I dare say, was not without incident. He was arrested at least twice on suspicion of burglary and motor vehicle theft. Although the details of these incidents were expunged from his record at the tender age of 18, they hinted at a more complex personality, old chap. As Bundy navigated adolescence, his behavior continued to raise concerns, foreshadowing the serious issues that would eventually arise. Bundy's high school years, I'm afraid, were marked by a mix of academic achievement and social awkwardness. He was an honors student and active in his school's debate team, but he struggled to form meaningful relationships with his peers. His behavior, you see, became increasingly erratic, with some acquaintances describing him as aloof and distant, whilst others recalled him as charming and charismatic. Despite these contradictions,
the Ted Bundy that I knew, there were things about him that were special, I would want to say. Charisma. I remember thinking what a handsome man he was, and probably wistfully myself, wishing that I were so. I remember him being well-spoken, intellectual, unassuming, arrogant but unassuming, in the sense of, I would say, disarming.
it's clear that Bundy's adolescent years laid the groundwork for his later development as a serial offender. His inability to form healthy relationships, combined with his growing fascination with violence and the macabre, created a toxic mix that would eventually manifest in his brutal crimes. Ted Bundy's life, old chap, took a bit of a downward spiral when he returned to Washington in 1969. That's when he met Elizabeth Klopfer, a single mother, and their relationship quickly became rather volatile.
I mean, it's hard to find words for how devastating it is, the loss of this.
This marked the beginning of a pattern of emotional abuse and manipulation that would continue to escalate, I'm afraid. As Bundy's personal life deteriorated, his darker tendencies began to emerge, rather like a dark cloud on the horizon. He became increasingly fascinated with violence, sex, and control, which eventually consumed him and set him on a path of destruction. Despite his outward appearance of normalcy, Bundy's inner world was rapidly unraveling, like a ball of twine. In an attempt to start anew, Bundy re-enrolled at the University of Washington in 1970, where he pursued a degree in psychology and became an honor student. By Jove. His professors held him in high regard, suggesting he was on the right path. Old bean. However, this facade hid the true nature of his thoughts and feelings, like a mask hiding one's true face. After graduating from the University of Washington in 1972, Ted Bundy's career prospects looked decidedly promising, old chap. He became involved in Governor Daniel J. Evans's re-election campaign and was appointed to the Seattle Crime Prevention Advisory Committee, a rather prestigious position if I do say so myself. He also became an assistant to Ross Davis, the chairman of the Washington State Republican Party, who viewed Bundy as intelligent and aggressive, a bit of a go-getter, if you will. However, beneath the surface, Bundy's personal life was complicated, a bit of a tangled web, if you ask me. He rekindled his romance with Diane Edwards whilst simultaneously seeing Elizabeth Klopfer, neither of whom was aware of the other's existence. A bit of a sticky situation, if I do say so myself. As Bundy navigated his career and personal life, he began to make connections that would eventually aid him in his future pursuits. He worked at Seattle's Suicide Hotline Crisis Center, where he helped people in crisis and even met Ann Rule, a co-worker who would later write a book about his heinous crimes. Bundy's education in psychology also proved useful in his manipulation of victims, as he would often feign injuries to appear less threatening. Despite his promising career prospects, Bundy's personal life continued to unravel. His relationships with Edwards and Klopfer were just the beginning of a complex web of deceit and manipulation that would eventually lead to his downfall, old chap.
When he found Marjorie, and he very much in love with her, and she is beautiful, she's intelligent, she's a year ahead of him in school and college.
He said at times that you and he would have some arguments or quarrels.
Primarily things like he lied. He was saying something that he knew would sound good to me.
Did you see any other times or any other occasions where his behavior seemed weird or odd?
He was odd to begin with, puffed up all the time, weird places.
This web of deceit and manipulation would eventually lead to devastating consequences.
Do you know if he was ever hurt by a girl?
Not that I knew of. I sort of felt that he hadn't had much contact with women till he got involved with me.
In January 1974, Bundy's behavior underwent a sudden change. He stopped contacting Diane Edwards, leaving her confused and distressed. Despite her attempts to reach him, Bundy seemed to have vanished. A month later, Edwards finally contacted Bundy by phone, demanding to know why he had ended their relationship. Bundy's response was unsettling. He claimed to have no idea what she was talking about before hanging up. Looking back, Edwards realized that Bundy's intentions had been manipulative from the start. His pursuit of her in 1973 had been a calculated scheme to control her feelings, and his subsequent withdrawal was a cruel act. This pattern of behavior would continue to escalate, ultimately leading to the devastating consequences that would define Bundy's life. Meanwhile, Bundy's life was taking a darker turn. He started skipping law school classes, and by April 1974, he had stopped attending altogether. This marked a significant departure from his previous academic achievements, where he had excelled as a student. As Bundy's academic pursuits fell by the wayside, his fascination with violence and crime continued to intensify. He became increasingly withdrawn and isolated, spending most of his time alone, indulging in his dark fantasies. Bundy's decision to abandon his law school education also coincided with a significant escalation in his criminal activities. He began to travel extensively, often using fake identities and stolen vehicles to facilitate his movements. This newfound mobility allowed him to target victims across multiple states, leaving a trail of terror and devastation in his wake. On January 4, 1974, a series of events began that would change the lives of many individuals forever. On that day, Ted Bundy committed a horrific crime that left one young woman profoundly affected. The victim, Joni Lentz, was a 19-year-old student at the University of Washington. Bundy had entered her basement apartment, where he brutally assaulted and bludgeoned her with a metal rod. Lenz suffered severe head injuries, including a fractured skull, and was left with permanent brain damage. The attack on Lenz marked the beginning of a violent crime spree that would span multiple states and claim numerous lives. Bundy's actions would go on to shock and horrify the nation, leaving a lasting impact on the lives of his victims and their families. Karen Sparks, a University of Washington student, was brutally assaulted by Bundy at her Seattle apartment. The attack resulted in severe injuries that would have lasting repercussions for her life. The assault on Sparks was one of the earliest documented instances of Bundy's violent tendencies. This event marked the beginning of a terrifying period that would plague the Pacific Northwest, leaving numerous lives irreparably altered. As the investigation into Sparks's assault progressed, law enforcement remained unaware that they were dealing with a predator who would stop at nothing to fulfill his perverse urges. This vicious assault was one of the earliest documented instances of Bundy's violent tendencies, serving as a foreboding indication of the dreadful acts he would later commit. On February 1, 1974, Linda Ann Healy, a University of Washington undergraduate, disappeared from her off-campus residence. Her bed was neatly made, but there was blood on the pillow. It took a year for Healy's remains to be found, discovered alongside those of other women in a secluded spot near Seattle. As the investigation into Healy's disappearance progressed, an uneasy atmosphere began to pervade the community. It felt like a malevolent force was lurking, waiting to strike again. The sense of unease was palpable, with many residents of Seattle feeling a growing sense of fear and anxiety. The disappearance of Healy, a young and vibrant university student, had sent shockwaves through the community, and many were left wondering if they or their loved ones could be next. As the police continued their search for Healy, they began to receive reports of other young women who had gone missing in the area. The investigation was expanding, and it was becoming increasingly clear that a serial offender might be at large. The community was on high alert, with many residents taking extra precautions to ensure their safety. The police were working tirelessly to follow up on leads and gather evidence, but the lack of progress was frustrating for all involved. As the days turned into weeks, the sense of unease only grew, and the community was left to wonder when the next disappearance would occur. On July 14, 1974, two college students, Janice Ott and Denise Nasland, disappeared from Lake Sammamish State Park in the Seattle area within a span of 3 hours. Witnesses reported seeing a young man named Ted, who had his arm in a sling, asking the women for help carrying his boat. As the summer of 1974 drew to a close, Bundy's dark tendencies seemed to be escalating. He quit his job at the Emergency Services Department in Olympia, Washington, and relocated to Salt Lake City to continue his education at the University of Utah Law School. On November 8, 1974, Bundy struck again, this time in Murray, Utah. Disguised as a police officer, he lured 18-year-old Carol Duranch from a shopping mall to his tan Volkswagen Beetle, where he attempted to put handcuffs on her before she managed to escape. Duranch's encounter with Bundy was a harrowing experience that left her shaken. She reported that Bundy had approached her in the mall parking lot, claiming to be a police officer and asking for her help in identifying a suspicious vehicle. Duranch accompanied Bundy to his Volkswagen Beetle, where he attempted to handcuff her, claiming it was necessary for her protection. However, Duranch's instincts kicked in, and she managed to free herself from the handcuffs and escape from the vehicle. The attempted abduction of Duranch marked a significant turning point in the investigation into Bundy's crimes. Duranch's bravery and quick thinking had foiled Bundy's plans, and her detailed description of the encounter and the vehicle would later prove crucial in identifying Bundy as a suspect. The incident also led to a heightened sense of awareness and urgency among law enforcement agencies, who began to suspect that a serial offender was at large. The investigation into Bundy's crimes was gaining momentum, and it was only a matter of time before he would be apprehended. Bundy's attempt to abduct Duranche was a pivotal moment in the investigation. Duranche's bravery and quick thinking allowed her to escape, and her subsequent testimony would play a crucial role in identifying Bundy as the perpetrator. The incident also marked a turning point in Bundy's behavior, as he became increasingly brazen and reckless in his attempts to abduct and harm women. Later that evening, 17-year-old Deborah Kent vanished after leaving a high school play. Investigators would later discover a key in the school parking lot that matched the handcuffs used on Duranche. As winter 1975 set in, the resort village of Snowmass, Colorado, was gripped by apprehension. On January 12, 1975, 23-year-old nurse Corinne Campbell vanished from her hotel after stepping out to grab a magazine from her room. This sudden disappearance sent shockwaves through the village, prompting a frantic search effort. Weeks later, Campbell's lifeless body was found in a snowbank outside the resort. Ted Bundy's life took a dramatic turn on August 16, 1975, when Highway Patrol Sergeant Bob Hayward pulled him over in Granger, Utah. Bundy was driving a tan Volkswagen Beetle, which caught Hayward's attention due to its suspicious idling near a residence. Upon searching the vehicle, Hayward found a disturbing array of items, including a ski mask, crowbar, ice pick, and handcuffs. Although Bundy was initially charged with evading the law, these findings hinted at a more sinister purpose. This encounter marked a crucial turning point in the investigation. Despite Bundy's true nature remaining concealed, the seeds of suspicion had been planted. It wasn't long before the reality of his actions began to surface. In October 1975, Bundy's luck ran out when Carol Duranche and 2 other women identified him in a police lineup. He was arrested and charged with attempted kidnapping, signaling the start of his downfall. As the investigation progressed, Bundy's legal troubles mounted. He was linked to the death of Corinne Campbell, and evidence, including hair found in his car and eyewitness accounts, pointed to his guilt. Bundy's extradition to Aspen, Colorado, marked the beginning of a long and twisted road that would ultimately reveal his true nature as a serial killer. While awaiting trial, he was given permission to use the law library, a decision that would prove disastrous. The trial itself was a significant event, with Bundy choosing to act as his own attorney.
And Bundy, of course, had this fantasy that he was a very good law student and could have been a good lawyer. This is all part of the fact that serial killers often operate.
This move allowed him to cross-examine witnesses and make statements to the court, showcasing his charismatic personality. However, this charm belied the horrific nature of his crimes, which would ultimately lead to his conviction and sentencing. On June 7, 1977, Bundy seized the opportunity to escape, jumping from a second-floor window and sparking a 6-day manhunt. Although he was eventually caught, this brief taste of freedom would not be his last attempt. Bundy's resourcefulness was evident as he planned his next escape. He deliberately lost weight, fixing his gaze on a small opening in the ceiling that led into the ductwork. Though it was a tight squeeze, Bundy was determined to break free. Bundy's second escape occurred on December 30, 1977, when he squeezed through the opening into the duct system, emerging into a vacant apartment. He changed into stolen clothes and stepped out into the night, leaving Colorado behind.
Generally, there is a lot of similarity among victims of serial killers. Serial killers in general have a type.
It was almost as if Bundy was trying to gain revenge over this particular woman, a particular class, a particular type of woman.
His destination was northern Florida, where he would continue his killing spree. The manhunt that ensued was extensive, with law enforcement agencies across the country on high alert. Bundy's ability to evade capture was impressive, but it was only a matter of time before he would be caught again. On December 30th, 1977, Ted Bundy executed his escape plan from the Colorado prison. He squeezed through an opening into the duct system, emerging into a vacant apartment. He changed into stolen clothes and stepped out into the night, leaving Colorado behind. His destination was northern Florida. As the new year began, Bundy's actions continued without interruption. On January 15, 1978, he targeted the Chi Omega sorority house at Florida State University. Bundy broke in around 3 a.m., strangling Margaret Bowman and Lisa Levy, and severely beating Kathy Kleiner and Karen Chandler with a blunt object. Kleiner, Chandler, and another student, Cheryl Thomas, survived their injuries but were unable to provide a description of their attacker. Bundy's next victim was 12-year-old Kimberly Leach, who disappeared from Lake City Junior High School on February 9, 1978. Her body was found 2 months later, hidden under a shed in Suwannee River State Park. Bundy's luck ran out on February 15, 1978, when Pensacola police officer David Lee pulled him over for driving with his headlights off. Lee discovered the car had stolen plates, and a violent struggle ensued. Lee subdued Bundy, who initially refused to give his name. Eventually, he admitted to being Ted Bundy, the FBI's most wanted fugitive. Trail. The trial of Ted Bundy began on June 25, 1979, at the Dade County Metro Justice Building in Miami. Bundy complained to Judge Edward Coward about the conditions of his prison cell, setting the tone for the proceedings. The trial was notable for being the first to be broadcast nationally. During the trial, Bundy acted as his own attorney, which allowed him to cross-examine witnesses and make statements to the court. This move was seen as a strategic attempt to gain sympathy from the jury and manipulate public opinion. The prosecution presented a wealth of evidence, including eyewitness testimony, physical evidence, and expert analysis.
They came down very dim, you could still see, and they were down for about 20 seconds and then they went back up. And Ted said to me, it's all right, they'll come back on. And I wondered how he knew. Why do you think the lights went out? They were testing the electric chair. And he knew it, because he had seen that happen before. But you saw...
On July 10, 1979, the jury delivered a guilty verdict, convicting Bundy of multiple counts of murder, kidnapping, and burglary. The following day, Judge Cowart sentenced Bundy to death, marking the beginning of a long and complex appeals process. Throughout the trial and subsequent appeals, Bundy's charisma and intelligence were on full display.
Defending yourself clearly is going to allow you to draw a great deal of attention to yourself.
However, these traits belied the horrific nature of his crimes, which would ultimately lead to his execution on January 24, 1989, in Florida's electric chair. Ted Bundy's trial was marked by his unpredictable behavior. He argued with his lawyers, chose to cross-examine a police officer himself, and even referred to himself in the third person while testifying. Despite the drama, the prosecution presented a solid case against Bundy. Forensic dentist Richard Souveron testified on July 18, 1979, comparing Bundy's dental impressions to the bite marks found on one of the Florida State University students. The results clearly showed that the bite marks matched. The jury delivered their verdict on July 24, 1979, finding Bundy guilty of the first-degree murders of Margaret Bowman and Lisa Levy, as well as the attempted murders of Kathy Kleiner, Karen Chandler, and Cheryl Thomas. The sentence was death by electrocution in Florida. Conclusion: the Ted Bundy case was a real watershed moment in the history of American true crime. It had a profound impact on the national consciousness. The sheer brutality and extent of his offenses sent shockwaves throughout the nation, captivating the public's attention and sparking widespread outrage. It was a game changer. Americans were shocked by the extreme violence and the number of offenses Bundy had committed. Thank you for joining us today. We appreciate your engagement and hope you found this story captivating. If you enjoyed this video, please like, share, and subscribe for more thrilling content. Your comments and feedback are invaluable to us, so please take a moment to share your thoughts.